Hi, I'm Caroline Sears, and today we will be talking about all of the proper ways to cool food. So, after this session, will be able to know all the methods to cool food correctly, know the correct cooling temperatures, and learn how to store food for further cooling. Just kind of an introduction. It is very important to always keep food out of the temperature danger zone, which we'll be discussing in just a moment, where pathogens can grow very easily to the best of your ability. Obviously, sometimes it can't be like helped, and then pathogens are just going to grow. But in this little session, you'll be able to learn all of the proper ways. And then this implies that when you are cooling food, it must be done quickly and effectively, so you can get out of the temperature danger zone as quickly as possible. So the temperature danger zone, the kind of broad, is the 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, or 5 degrees centimeters to 57 degrees centigrade, no centimeters. But there's an even more narrow range, which is 70 degrees Fahrenheit to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, or 21 degrees centigrade to 52 degrees centigrade. And bacteria grows even more rapidly. So this is where you really just need to food cannot be within that temperature range. And so when you're cooling food, it's obviously important to think about all foods, but especially TCS foods. So once you start the cooling process, you need to cool food from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to 41 degrees Fahrenheit, or lower, below 41 degrees Fahrenheit, within 6 hours. So within the first 2 hours, cool food from 135 degrees Fahrenheit to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. And then over the next 4 hours, you need to cool food from 70 degrees Fahrenheit to 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So within that 6 hours, your food will have gone through the temperature danger zone and hopefully effectively cooled, and no pathogens will begin to grow. And this is very important. If food is not cooled to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 degrees centigrade within 2 hours, it must be reheated and cooled again, because if you don't get there within 2 hours, most likely pathogens will start to grow, and that will be very dangerous for those who are consuming the food. So obviously all food looks different, and there are many factors that will affect how quickly food cools or how easily food will cool. So the thickness or the density of the food, the denser the food, the longer it takes to cool, and that's just kind of because it's so thick that it will take so long for it to kind of thaw. The size of the food, if you need large amounts of food to cool, one way to do that quicker is to cut it up into smaller pieces of food so it doesn't take as long. Also, the storage container that food is in, kind of one thing that you wouldn't normally think about, but sometimes when you're cooling, as I will discuss later, that there's different methods, and the storage container will affect it. So stainless steel transfers heat away from food faster than plastic. So if you need to get something cooled, most likely you will lean towards stainless steel instead of plastic. Okay, let's move on to talk about the methods for cooling food. One method to not do is never cool large amounts of hot food in a cooler. That is just not good, and immediately you'll have pathogens growing, and it will not be good, and the food will be wasted. Doing this will not move the food through the temperature danger zone quick enough, so it will sit there for more time than it needs to be. So that's one major thing to make sure that doesn't happen. One method so now we have 5 methods that I'm going to talk about. So there's an ice water bath. So you need to divide your food into smaller containers, place them into a clean prep stick or large pot with ice water. So that's like what I said earlier about how the storage container that food is in affects how quickly it cools. So it's very important that it's in stainless steel will work much better than plastic, but obviously if you only have plastic, you have to make do with what you have. And if you want the food to cool quicker and more evenly with this ice water bath, stir the food often that's in the container. So say you need to cool a big vat of bolognese, you gotta put it into your different containers, preferably stainless steel, put them in the ice water bath, and don't just leave them, don't just walk away. Make sure you stir it so the cool food and everything can just get cool. The next method is an ice paddle. These are plastic paddles that can be filled with ice or water and then put in the freezer to be frozen, obviously. And so when food is stirred with an ice paddle, it cools quickly, and so you have a long paddle full of ice, and it's that's more manual than the ice water bath. But if you need to cool something much faster, you can combine the ice water bath and the ice paddle. Because if you have, so how I said you need to stir the food when it's in the ice water bath, you could stir it with an ice paddle, and then you kind of have two forms of ice or coolness going into the food. So yeah, that's the ice paddle. Next we have the blast chiller. So the blast chiller is kind of a type of refrigerator, or more of like a very intense freezer. And so this method, the blast chiller, blasts cold air across food at high speeds to remove heat. So you put it in and it locks, and it's very effective. And you can use this to cool large amounts of food. So say you have a bunch of chickens that you've cooked, but you need to cool them because they're going to be used for something else. You can put all the chickens in there and they will get cooled. Then we have a tumble chiller, and this method tumbles bags of hot food in cold water. This works well with thick food, such as mashed potatoes, because mashed potatoes, they're very thick, and so that tumble chiller will be the most effective. And the last method for properly cooling food is ice or cold water as an ingredient. So to cool soups or stew right away, add less water than is required in the recipe. And then after you finish cooking, you will add cool water or ice after you finish cooking to cool it down, and that will make up for the water that you did not put in while you were actually making the soup or stew. And then, so those are all of the methods. Each of them work in their great ways, and it's just if you're in a situation where you need to cool food, you'll be able to decide which one works the best. And obviously, say you cool something and you need to keep cooling, there's ways to do that. So how to store food for further cooling. So you can loosely cover food containers before storing. They don't have to be completely tightly wrapped as long as they are covered, or food can be left uncovered if it is not at risk for contaminants. And that is one really important thing to remember, that obviously the whole goal is that pathogens do not get into the food. So if you uncover food, just make sure that you know whether or not it will be very risky for contaminants. So that is all the methods, all the temperature requirements for cooling food, all the factors. So kind of in conclusion, learning how to cool food correctly will greatly impact how any restaurant is run, because if you can't cool food like correctly, it could take longer, and then obviously everything needs to move like in a flow. Also very important to know all of the temperatures, because those are the most important thing, and having the risk of contaminants and pathogens needs to be very low, and knowing all of how to cool food correctly will help that happen. Okay, so now complete the true false at the end of the handout, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.